My name is Bob Parker. Our company is Parker Productions, and I'd like to discuss with you today the game applications of the 450 Bushmaster using the 275 grain Black Max, the Parker 275 Black Max, and the Parker 270 grain E-Max. Now, to begin with, I need to say that I do not consider these two cartridges to be a long-range cartridge. Long range has multiple implications, and it's quite debatable on what it really is. When you start looking at the wide open spaces of the West, long range is one thing. But when you're hunting east of the Mississippi in the mostly timbered areas, a long shot or a long range shot is quite something else. I do consider this combination of the 275 Black Max and the 270 grain E-Max to be suitable for thin-skinned game to the 300-yard mark, and under right conditions. By that I mean you have a good rest, there's not too much wind, you have good optics. Under the right conditions, it is very suitable for the 400-yard mark. Now, I realize the Bushmaster will be used primarily in the straight wall case states, and therefore, extremely long range, the 400-yard mark will be rare. But if it comes by, this 275 grain Black Max and the 270 E-Max combination in the Bushmaster will serve very well. It'll serve well for close range and across the food plots. It will have ample energy to give clean harvest of thin-skinned game. Now, energy, when you talk about that, kinetic energy, the benchmark that has traditionally been set for a big game is 1,000 foot-pounds. A foot-pound, the energy it takes to move 1 pound 1 foot is what is the yard mark that it goes by. And that 1,000 foot-pounds has traditionally been the mark that's been set. Now, I realize this, that foot-pounds of energy do not necessarily kill. Here's what I mean. If you shoot a whitetail through the lungs with a solid nosed, non-expanding bullet, it will not harvest that animal nearly as quickly as if you shoot that same animal with a bullet that rapidly expands its energy. And it's just, on thin-skinned game, you need something that lets its energy be released rather quickly so it can cleanly and quickly harvest the animal. Now, every bullet has its applications. Just like you don't want a solid in the rib cage of a white-tailed deer, you don't want a thin-skinned jacket in the shoulders of a Cape buffalo. So, with these different applications comes different types of projectiles, but this is one thing that is necessary. They must be able to transfer their energy. I'd like to look with you now for just a bit at some of the historically traditional bullets and the energy that they carry that have been really strong whitetail bullets and great harvesters of whitetail game. I've simply picked out two. One is the standard long time 30-30 Winchester. This particular projectile usually, when it comes to the way it's loaded, The 30-30 has been loaded with a 150 grain bullet and a 170 grain bullet. The 150 grain bullet leaves the muzzle at 2,300 feet per second. It arrives at 200 yards with 757 foot-pounds of energy, which is really not much. The 170 grain 30-30 leaves the muzzle at 2,200 feet per second. It arrives at 200 yards with 759 foot-pounds of energy, which again is a bit on the margin. The other long-term, woods cartridge is the 35 Remington. Now, as you can tell, this box has been around a while, just like the cartridge. But this little cartridge with a 200 grain round nose bullet has always had a reputation of being an extremely fine whitetail harvesting projectile. It leaves the barrel at 2,000 feet per second and arrives at the 200-yard mark with 728 foot-pounds of energy. Now, all those stats really don't mean much, because when these bullets were in their heyday, the shots that were taken were, I would just simply guess, 50 to 125 yards, and both cartridges carried plenty of energy to do what they intended to do. Now, in our present time, these two cartridges have long since found some other place, and they're being replaced by softer and more easily shot cartridges. One of those right now, and especially I guess the most popular, is the 350 Legend. The Barnes makes a 170 grain bullet for this gun. It leaves the muzzle at 2125, and it arrives at 200 yards with 766 foot-pounds of energy. Browning, with its 150 grain projectile, it leaves the muzzle at 2325. It arrives at 200 yards with 905 foot-pounds of energy. The Federal 160, 2,300 feet per second, and it arrives at 200 yards with over the 1,000 foot-pounds. It goes in at 1,041. The Bear Creek 140 grain bullet leaves the muzzle at 2,600 feet per second, and it also arrives at the 200-yard mark with 1,044 foot-pounds of energy. When it comes to the Bushmaster, the factory Hornady Black, the 250 FTX bullet, carries quite a bit more energy. The 250 leaves the muzzle at 2,200 feet per second, and it arrives at 200 yards with 1,274 foot-pounds of energy, and it arrives at 300 yards with 874. So it's really it's a good 100-yard better projectile than 50 to 100-yard better projectile than the 30-30 or the 35 Remington that we have mentioned. Now, when it comes to extending the range of this weapon, the Parker 275 grain Black Max, I'm quoting you my hunting loads, loaded to a velocity of 2,275 feet per second. When it arrives at 200 yards, it's carrying 1,888 foot-pounds of energy. At 300 yards, it's carrying 1,250 foot-pounds of energy, and at our elevation, with our conditions, at 400 yards, this little bullet still has 1,092 foot-pounds of energy, which makes it a very, very capable thin-skinned, not long range, but at least medium range cartridge. And I need to show you, this again is my hunting loads. This is the 275 grain Black Max. This is about 3 inches of hunting magazines, and I saturated them, not just wet them. I saturated them for about almost a week, and then shot it with my regular hunting load. And you can see that it released its energy quickly. and that bullet will kill. So that's the game application for this little weapon. Now, can you shoot larger game with it? Well, absolutely. We have field reports coming in all the time from well, that's an exaggeration. We have field reports coming in. That's accurate. Of guys that are using the bullet velocity combination that's easily acquired by the Bushmaster, and we have bear, elk, and other hogs, other rather tough game taken easily with these. Do I consider it to be an elk cartridge? No. If I were hunting elk or bear, I wouldn't take the Bushmaster. I'd choose a weapon that really suited for it. But all that being said, it still does very well. Bottom line, I consider the 450 Bushmaster loaded with the Parker 275 grain Black Max bullet to be a very sturdy 300 yard, and if your conditions are right, a good 400 yard. It'll work at 400 yards also. Now, one last thing. These barrels on these guns are short, and this little fella is noisy. When you put a muzzle brake on it, it's very noisy. And so I suggest to you strongly that you always wear your hearing protections. It'll make a better outcome in the long term. As always, thank you for watching. Bob Parker, Parker Productions.